Greetings, everyone. Mario Blandini here, founder of Resolve Networks and host of the Comeback Podcast, where we explore hopeful thoughts and perspectives involving good deeds of people. One of my favorite topics, and my mission is to prove that good is more than charity. When we're united by purpose, I believe everyday people will be the decisive difference in achieving greater good, simply because we're stronger together. And my hope is that the good deeds by volunteers will play a part in they themselves reaching their highest potential. And joining me for a discussion today is Charley Ansbach, who, like me, likes sustainability. And thanks a lot for joining the show today, Charley.
My pleasure. It's great to be with you.
All right. Are you feeling hopeful today?
You know, actually, I am. Very. I'm watching and talking to people right now. There is so much pent-up readiness in and around businesses and people, and just in the area where I'm in, which is Northern California, is there is a sense of of people waiting to release, kind of just get going. And it wouldn't be a surprise with the pandemic and all that there's a lot of pent-up energy. But the hope, the positiveness about that energy, that people are going to do things, yeah, I feel very hopeful.
Indeed. One of my favorite sayings is from my military days, to kick ass and take names. I think everybody loves the kick ass part. It's the taking names part they're not as good at. But darn it, you got to kick the ass first in order to take the names, right? And so, yes, I couldn't agree more. And I spent most of my life growing up in California. My parents still live not too far from you in the greater Sacramento area. And certainly, sustainability is something that's important, but tell us a little bit more about your own comeback story, because you probably aren't sitting here having forecasted you would be here, and talk a little bit more about your less so credentials, but just what is it that has you working in the area that you focus, because it's an important part of why we're doing this podcast series, and I'm happy that you joined me today.
Well, glad to share it. It's the quick kind of high points are that I was among the early adopters of social entrepreneurship before it had that name, and created a national program with a program that got a lot of national attention through the U.S. Department of Labor. And I took the concept of social entrepreneurship and applied it to public projects, and it got a lot of attention. But there was nobody else playing in that sandbox when I came out of that project. And so I started working with a global firm in fundraising for nonprofit organizations, and they were spectacular. It was the Ketchum Corporation. And but I ended up starting my own company and with them and ultimately in partnership, and came to a Y in that road, and a large company wanted to buy mine. And it was, again, a successful company. I said, all right, so I sold the company. It was right at the beginning of the last recession. Good timing, one would think.
Congratulations.
We got into the middle of it, and they had to go bankrupt. And in the course of going bankrupt, they had to hand me back my company. That company was covered with red ink, and it still had my name attached to that. Mm-hmm. I was a single dad. And suddenly I'm burdened with enormous amount of debt, no income, and I'm going, under normal circumstances, I would just pull the covers over my head and wait. Mm-hmm. But I have a son down the hall there that really likes food, and so I had to get busy on, first of all, dealing with getting rid of all that red ink, so that it took every cent that I had, and I came out of it the other end going, now what? And suddenly I started getting calls that said, hey, help us with turnarounds on our nonprofits. So I helped doing that for a few. Then suddenly I meet people in the for-profit sector in building companies. And I was also invited to teach social responsibility, corporate responsibility, and now sustainability and social entrepreneurship at the graduate level in the Graduate School of Management at University of California, Davis. I was first invited to do that at University of Pacific. So suddenly I'm in this mix. I'm talking to people and I'm getting companies and they're coming and we're talking and life is changing. I meet some interesting people worldwide, end up in the midst right now of writing books and talking with people and helping companies and organizations look at their sustainability and the combination of social purpose and business purpose. And it's an exciting, an amazing space to be in.
Yeah, a great story. And we ran into each other through a mutual friend, Alex Chomp at Evolution Accelerator. I was looking for some advice from smart people who could help me rationalize how to bring this purpose-based business to market. And Alex, we have a lot of shared purposes, have 4 former Marines, we are men of faith, and a lot of other connections. And so I value what Evolution Accelerator was able to do. And I want to thank you also for some of the work you do in just helping entrepreneurs who have a social cause, because while companies can engage you in an exchange of money, I really appreciate and wanted you to help tell a story of sustainability and kind of why a purpose business was not only a good idea, but it could exist in a profit motive mixture. So we'll get into a lot of that for sure. And we'll try not to talk too much about the electrical consumption of data centers, which happens to be my job, prior to going on my own thing, which you probably have a lot of things to talk about. So for me, the first question I'd ask is, what is it about sustainability that really floats your boat, that gets you really engaged? Because sustainability is a part of corporate social responsibility. I'd love for you just to unpack that for people in a way that doesn't sound intimidating, because oftentimes the buzzwords are used from a corporate perspective, but 4 out of 5 people, based on surveys, want to see companies have a purpose and make an impact. So I think that's really something that everybody probably wants to come to understand.
And there's multiple ways to come at this. I'm going to take the practical way. And by the way, thank you for drawing attention to Alex, yes, and Evolution, because he's been a spark for me. The United Nations Population Department is forecasting a growth in the middle class from 2015 to 2030 of doubling the size of the middle class globally. How that'll be affected by COVID, we don't know yet, but the forecast being that's a lot of people who want to buy a lot of stuff. And that's a big opportunity for business. Mm-hmm. Problem is we're running headlong as this demand opportunity increases, we're running headlong into the dwindling availability of resources to make those products with. That we have tapped into the water, we've tapped into our extracted materials, we've even tapped into human resources in such an intense and kind of take, make, and waste approach of the industrial era, which is no criticism. It just is that era ran its course, and we've come to the end of it. And so now businesses, just from a business standpoint, have to re-envision themselves in order to deal with this change in the availability of natural and human resources. And so if you cannot conjure that point of view, you're at direct odds with being successful in business increasingly on a global basis. Different parts of the world will adopt this or face this at different paces, different speeds. And there'll be resistance, there'll be all kinds of stuff that's thrown in. But the long and short of it is the curve, the trend line is now changed. And the industrial era has ended, and we're transitioning into an era in which you have to have, and I think it's a rightful term that you're using, purpose. You have to have that sense of, how can I now contribute to the sustainability, the resilience? We use that interchangeably for a moment. The resilience of the planet and the resilience of our community. And how can I also tie that to the resilience of my business? Because the two are now increasingly inseparable.
I agree.
I teach class on, and it's my own point of view, is that there's 2 ways to look at sustainability. 2 vantage points. One of them is outward facing, and one of them is inward facing. So if I'm looking at sustainability from an outward facing, I look at the community as a company and I go, wow, look, they don't have access to clean water. I can help them. Let's get together and let's do that. Let's make the place better, and all boats rise. Let's help. That's one. That's sustainability looking outward. Sustainability looking inward says, oh my God, we don't have access to clean water. We need that in order to stay in business, to make our product or service. Yeah. So one is totally self-serving and insulated. We won't survive. And the other one is the marketplace around us won't survive if we don't do something. So that to me is the essential twin perspectives of sustainability for companies, and adopting, as you, I think, well said, the sense of purpose in this environment of change from an industrial context to a sustainable context.
But what do you say to people then that would say that, hey, I'm in business to delight my audiences, and they want the convenience, ease, and all the other things that makes it make what might be a counterpoint to having it purpose, right? There's a struggle there. And I think the reality is, as humans, of course there's a struggle. There's limited resources. That's called a struggle. So how do you think that that people themselves can be more informed about this? Because I'd argue we're beat over the head about you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. And maybe viscerally we like, okay, well, no, I'm not going to do that because I'm important and I love this convenience. But part of having a purpose might be enough to then have gravity to say, hey, maybe I'm willing to give up a smidge of my convenience to allow those who are working to delight me with their products or services in order for us to, with a shared purpose, achieve a better outcome.
I really resonate with what you're saying here. This is there is a somewhat some people will put it in question, but there's a concept called tragedy of the commons, and it is where it's the urge to take a little bit more advantage of something we shouldn't do because it gives me an advantage over my competitor. And what the heck, no one will notice. So the classic example is people who are grazing livestock on a area of land. And one of them discovers, if I put one more on the one more piece of livestock or one more cow on the land, I'll make more than my neighbors. And who's going to notice? Yes, it'll use up the ground faster, but who's going to notice? But pretty soon, when everybody starts doing that, you don't end up with a place you can graze your livestock. Right. And so we're looking right now, we're at a time of very interesting change in my mind. It's coming up with the community point of view that says we have to pull together a little bit.
Amen.
That is we're at a time and place when that question, should we do that? Or should I only pay attention to my own well-being? We see it playing out in grocery stores right now where people are hoarding versus, I got to get that toilet paper. So my neighbor can't get any. How long can you keep doing that? And without friction beginning to play a role in the community. We're at a very interesting place as not just businesses, but as a community overall, in which shall we help each other because it's in our best interest, or we shall help ourselves because it's in our best interest? Where shall we go?
Yeah, and I think the answer is both, Charlie. It's much the inspiration behind the gaming platform that I've come to ideate and bring to market. This idea that if we do something good for our community, not only do you feel better and you get the helper's high, because whether you believe in Darwinism or a higher creator, it's there. And obviously convenience has to be a really big part of that. But the idea of having, a in real life game where you can, as the Zero Trace app that's available for folks, they can, during the normal course of their day, in front of a retail establishment or a convenience store, collect a couple pieces of trash, mostly because, to your point, somebody else threw it down. It wasn't them that threw it down, but as a community, we all can play a part. And I just really think that if we're aligned with a common purpose, as you mentioned, and that's the thesis behind this entire business model, because creating a virtuous circle does involve, in the case of what we're trying to do in my company, which is engage consumers or players with brands that they engage with that drive sponsorship of donations to a cause, which then creates a bigger impact, thus motivating the players to help the brands, to help the nonprofits, to help the players, to help the brands, to help the nonprofits. It's this virtual circle. And I think that's part of this thing. You mentioned change. Would it be fair to say, rather than change, because people hate change, could we call it evolution? Because guess what? Change is inevitable. And at least in my thought process, yeah, we're going to evolve to be something different because we're going to be forced through scarcity of resources, forced through other things that are outside of our control. But there are things that we can do that are inside of our control. So talk about that evolution, which, pun intended, is the name of the accelerator you give your time to help companies like mine.
Absolutely. No, I love what you're doing. And I think it ties to the spirit of right now extremely well. But it has a long history of people pulling together and of people and of companies working to be part of that. So let's just say that you've taken care of your water issues, or you're in the midst of it, you're thinking about it. And you also get into, I want to help the community around me. I wanted to apply to my brand. I wanted to show who we are. That's really critical for attracting top talent right now.
It's multifaceted. Yeah. There's a win-win-win everywhere.
People making these decisions about where I want to work, and they look intently at companies and how nice are you? Do you have any, are you messing things up, or are you making things better? And it really gets down to that. I have, for a sidebar, I've had for years when I was raising money for nonprofits, was that I had executives from for-profit companies coming to me reasonably regularly and saying, I've spent my whole life making lots of money and all, but I really want to give back now. Can you show me how to get into this? That was normal. Recently, I got a couple of high-end millennial innovators from Silicon Valley coming to me and going, we all know how to make money. What we're really lacking is we don't have a sense of purpose. And that's what's driving all of us to really where we want to work and how we want to spend our days. Can we talk with you about how to put purpose and profit together? We want to create new businesses, but we want to get this focus. And so I think that's resonating deeply. I think there's also an opportunity for business leaders that you're attracting and you're working with to share their information and start to show pathways. And I re-say this, and I'll dovetail at your next question. But I was sitting with a group of undergraduate students in entrepreneurship, and we were having lunch. And I said, how's it going? And they said, it's great. I said, why are you doing this? Why are you studying this? And they said, well, because I don't want to work for those big companies. They just suck the life out of you in the brain, and they have no heart. I want to do this. And they say, oh, that's great. That's great. So how are you going to do it differently? And I got a lot of blank stares. Uh-huh. And so we're looking right now. We've got a lot of people in the past, since the late 1700s, early 1800s. We've been seeing people who have been transforming business and making it work for people with purpose and highly profitable. But it's tough for them to get traction. And so you're talking a key question. How do we start creating not only the climate for it, but how do we encourage each other as business leaders to behave in this purposeful way, progressively and widely? And new ideas will emerge as a result, and high impact will result. But you've raised the question, and that's the most important first step.
Well, hey, how about this? It seems to me that, at least in my time as a Silicon Valley executive, that if there was somebody in your ecosystem that had anything to do with something that might take away attention from you, from a target audience, they were a vehement competitor. And the idea is that you had to do everything in your power to eliminate them, right? But do you see an opportunity for companies and brands, even if they're in the same industry, to have a shared scorecard, so to speak, in a way that they can continue to provide their differentiation, but still have a common purpose? Because one might argue that every convenience store on the planet has an opportunity to make the world more sustainable. And almost draw a circle around any group of brands that might otherwise consider themselves vehement competitors. Do you see that when united by purpose, they can still collaborate on that purpose while competing in all other aspects of the business?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, it's a very interesting, there's 2 points I'll make. First, yes, and I'll give you an example of it happening somewhat recently and for very good outcome. And the second is, well, the whole thing of corporate responsibility and how it's sometimes, often in the past, has been run and that's changing. So these 2 points come together. The CSR, for me, for a long, long time, was run as kind of a pontoon floating next to the mothership. It had nothing to do with core value creation. It was, we have to look good in the community. I have to be able to say I did something nice when I go to the Kiwanis meeting, whatever. But the upshot of it is it had nothing to do with the core value. And some of the biggest companies in the world had fantastic CSR programs, but were not operating well at their core. Enron being one of them is a good example. Great CSR program. We know the story.
That's called greenwashing, right? Is that one of those terms that's fair?
It's greenwashing. It is, yes, it is. It's basically painting a picture of yourself through promotion that has nothing to do with who you actually are.
Right.
And that has gone on for a long time. And we're calling we're calling the kind of calling that out right now. You can't do that as easily. Social media and all doesn't let you. So Nike was a good example of getting hit with that early. Anyway, the upshot of it is that CSR now really is being discovered as bring it into the core value of the company.
Yep.
What are our core goals as a business? What are our top 3 goals as a business? And what can we do in the community that ties to that brand and furthering how we meet those goals? Because if it's not tied to that, again, it's floating next to the mothership. It goes up and down with budget and availability, has no meaning other than, as my friend at HP who crafted their global program said initially, my job is to create a bank of good works so that when we inevitably screw up, we can point to it and go, see, we're not all bad. That's not any longer the scope of what CSR can and should be doing. Now it's at the heart of creating your brand. Now your purpose has to show forward in who are you and how are you in this community? How are you taking care of the negative externalities you create? Beyond that, how are you helping the community to, in line with your brand, how are you helping the community to be better, a better place to be? That's your marketplace, by the way. And so the better you make that, the better your business opportunities become and your longevity. So the example is the banking industry in Sacramento. No, I didn't just single out my town here. It just happened. Was that the banking industry decided that banks would come together and discuss group giving on what are the main problems that we're all getting asked to support here. Why don't we get together as a group of banks and start talking about what can we jointly invest in to increase the impact of what we're doing as a sector, but pull our capital together. And it was this huge, like the banking industry went, what? When did we start working together with our competitors? And it was so positive that everybody had to go, well, that's a pretty good idea.
Heck yeah.
So yes, industries can work together and actually accentuate their brand differences within the context of a unified effort together to show their industry is working with purpose.
Right.
That increases the brand value of everybody in that sector.
Well, as I say in my show open, I truly believe that we're stronger together. And a lot of people think of that, it was just, well, the volunteers that play the games will be what makes it stronger together. No, it's them aligned with a shared purpose that involves for-profit and nonprofits, where the goal of CSR is actually to have a scorecard, right? I mean, it's not just, hey, we do it because it's good to do. I'm a big fan of the whiteboard video that's very well watched from Dan Pink, who talked about motivation. As a marketer, I've always studied that. And he essentially said there's purpose and profit motives. And oftentimes, if your profit motive becomes unmoored from your purpose motive, bad things happen in business. And there's a lot of great examples in innovation around open source software and other, let's say thought leader type of companies who've chosen to organize their way that makes it more self-directed at work, gets people to do activities where they learn more. And guess what? It's fun because they can actually see the impact that they're making. And while that's very specific to just organizational management and economics, I think it has a perfect analogy to both sides of this equation, the consumer and the provider working together and really focusing on a purpose. Because if we keep our purpose motive at least equal in weight to the profit motive, good things will happen, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So one of the things I want to tell you is, do you have any big predictions? Naturally, we're coming to the end of 2020. Some people say thankfully. For me, I've had experiences this year as a part of my own comeback story, the ups and downs where maybe I'm wise enough to know, or at least old enough. I'm not the millennial entrepreneur. I'm maybe a late bloomer, and I'm a Gen X Nintendo generation entrepreneur, but coming from the same Silicon Valley space. What are your predictions then? And I think it's safe to say that corporations will do more, but based on what your discussions with corporations, I expect people to want to play a bigger role. You mentioned that even earlier. There's this pent up energy, almost like an itch that, hey, when are we going to be able to go out and do some stuff in the real world? And my gaming platform is about animating that. But from a corporate perspective, what are you hearing leadership talk about in terms of what they want to achieve? Because those predictions, I feel, if we actually try to keep score, even if we fail, the act of keeping score gives us data that allows us to be more successful the next time, right?
No, sure. Well, the prediction in general is there's going to continue to be a high need and a high demand for innovation. And there's a lot of capital right now looking for the right place to go.
Resolve Networks, by the way. Send it over here. We're looking for investors.
There you are. So make sure to stand tall.
Yes, sir.
But the upshot of it is that innovation is going to drive a lot because we are in the middle of a gradual but I think irreversible market shift from industrial models to sustainable models.
Yep.
And in the course of that, your focus that I think you're rightly putting on, the sense of purpose, the sense of unifying direction, we need it more than ever. And so companies that learn to capitalize on it, we've seen the worst of it right now. Where we're still in the midst of seeing the bifurcation, the kind of political ideological bifurcation of the community, that fanning flames on that serves too many purposes at the moment. But we have to actually round that corner because we really are, we're able as a community, not just a nation, but a global community, we're able to do, there's no limit on what we're able to do.
When united by a shared purpose, I agree.
We have shared purpose. And that to me is the power of companies. It's the power of communities. It's the power of really our collective worldwide. But it's that sense of purpose. And the more we share it, and I'm applauding deeply what you do, is the more we align with, the more we identify a sense of purpose, the more we incorporate it into what we do, and the more we share it and link with others based on that, the enormity of what we can accomplish and what we can feel like we're part of is it's just kind of beyond measure.
Well, my aim is to actually measure it, because it turns out that technology is actually good at keeping score. Everybody loves kicking butt, but actually keeping score is something that they generally don't like to do. So I'm hoping that can be part of at least the mix that allows it to make it more convenient. Because I think one of the challenges is that everybody, I think, if they can overcome their competitive instincts, everybody does want to be good. And when I say everybody, we consider corporations to be things. They are a living thing. That brand is a thing that stands for something, and it's the combination of the people, and the purpose. If you were to give advice to the folks that are listening to us today, kind of the quick elevator pitch for what you aim your students in an entrepreneurship perspective, what you want them to walk away with, in the whole idea of the IBM, tell them in the beginning, in the middle, and the end, right? You probably have to say it 3 times. What is it that is the walk away that you would tell entrepreneurs here? Because I totally agree with you. The next wave of innovation is where we put purpose at equal footing to profit, if not experiment with elevating purpose above profit and seeing what happens.
Yeah, I really feel strongly that you either you reincorporate purpose into your vision of your business, and that purpose include sustainability, that ability for us to be resilient and continue what we do on this planet and in our businesses and in our lives, that we can continue doing them. That's what sustainability is all about. So for me, the takeaway is that operating with purpose uncovers opportunities to serve your customers and your profitability in ways that not viewing it from there misses. And
I agree.
I tell my students, I said, here it is. You can make money by stealing from each other, or you can make money by not, and taking a totally different approach to doing well. But it's a choice. It's a management choice every day. It's hard to run a business. It's hard to be successful. It's hard to be profitable year after year after year, or even to get started. And so there's always pressure to just find the shortest, easiest way to get to that revenue and maintain it. Well, how you do it is how you go to bed at night and what you think of yourself, and then what you do to the rest of the community around you.
Right.
So I personally just tell them, who do you want to be? Who do you want your business to be? And that really comes down to the choice. You can do it either way. And you'll probably get away with both of them, the first one, for a while. I don't think as long anymore.
I think you're right, Charlie. And as a brand person, you talked about the brand is the identity of the company, and no doubt about it, no one's going to disagree that having that brand stand for something certainly helps. We know for a fact that engagement is higher. Protection of the brand when a misstep happens is higher. And I think that's one of the cool things. You mentioned it before. Why did they do it? Well, to help build up a defense in the event that they stumbled. Why not make that a beneficial side effect of doing it because you want to engage your audience more, right? I mean, it's like it's a win-win. You get both.
Absolutely. And I mean, I have my checklist of, and I know that you've got one as well. If you're working on sustainability, you're mitigating risk. That's why BlackRock and others came out and said, we're only investing in sustainable companies because otherwise it's too risky. You're attracting top talent, the top millennial talent, and the next generations coming on that I've talked to. They're very picky about, I want to work for the companies that have that purpose, that have that beyond profit. And you have new markets, you have cost cutting, you have revenue increases, you have you spark innovation within your company when you start setting a purpose. The benefits are very trackable. The metrics are very clear.
Yep.
And so it's not just doing good. It's doing good business is part of that. It's just a way of being, and it's good business to do that. And that's the part that we talk about a lot with peers in business and in my classes. Said it's no longer a thing of give back, because that implies you took something. I want to be giving constantly to the replenishment of my business, my community, my working group. I want to be continuously giving back through my business to the replenishment and success of the community, and my business is part of it.
Yeah. Well, my virtuous circle business model, which I've just enjoyed talking with you and Alex and others about, really is based on the idea of giving first. Like, what if humans actually did a good deed first, and then we see what happens? Companies can go do good things first and see what happens. And nonprofits exist to only do good things. So it's this idea that if the doing good is part of not just your purpose, but your strategy or the greater why. As a brand guy, the only question that matters is why, not who, what, where, when. It's really why. And I think you sharing your expertise with us and your hopeful thoughts, because I really do believe we don't need to look at sustainability as a stick. It can be a carrot and be something that can really unite us. So with that, I want to thank you a lot, Charley, for taking some time to share your thoughts and your hopes and feelings. Anything that you want to recap, before we go, in just terms of where you see yourself going from a sustainability perspective, because you still got plenty of gas in the tank, right, sir?
Oh, absolutely. I want to give, this is, you brought it up at the beginning, my whole experience in being part of the evolution team, when I brought sustainability into the discussion with that group, because this is where leadership has to come from the CEO of a company. And this sense of purpose will not happen unless top leadership is on board with it and blessing it within the whole community. If Alex Chomp had not been the head of evolution, this wouldn't have happened in evolution. But I brought it up, and he went, well, of course. And the minute that he went, of course, the whole team went, well, wait a minute, I've got some stuff that plays right into that. And here's another avenue, and here's some other people that might want to come and do business with us. And it was this little rocket ship of, it contributed to new business. It contributed to a sense of expanded camaraderie within the group. It was a wonderful, unexpected catalytic moment. And I predict that will happen for a lot of companies the minute you allow it to, and introduce this sense of purpose into your planning on a real fundamental business basis.
I couldn't agree with you more, Charley, and I thank you for joining. As we go to the second score of the 21st century, what will be the theme that we'll remember these 2 decades by? I think that it's that purpose and having corporate social responsibility, not for the sake of having it, but because it's a part of being good and doing good and engaging audiences and creating that virtuous circle and keeping it going like I described. As always, we're here to bring you thoughts and perspectives and hopefully inspiration around how good deeds can help change our world. I'm Mario Blandini, founder of Resolve Networks and the host of this Comeback podcast. Thanks a lot for joining, folks, and I look forward to bringing you more stories of hope and comebacks in future episodes.